But there have been criticisms of this new history. First, some of the brethren wanted more traditional, faith-promoting history. Some people called by their critics Mormon traditionalists had only begrudging praise and more often criticism. Elders Benson and Packer did not like the new trends in writing about the Mormon past. So there was a growing conservative criticism, which process often left them on the intellectual margins. These are all quotations. And historians were increasingly attacked, it's a polemical word, by conservative academics led by a few BYU political scientists. I cannot but deny it, I am with child. In their view, the new Mormon history was a form of secularism. But he's just said the methods of the new Mormon history would be secular or naturalistic. So he granted that criticism. It tends to be secular, whatever that is. It's vague. It's code language signaling something. And to prove their point, they claimed that the authors were guilty of employing loose working assumptions that were drawn perhaps unconsciously from 19th century positivism. Now, one of my colleagues used that term, and I kept saying, David Bone, stop using it. They will look it up in a dictionary and they will claim that you're saying that they're atheists. They have never read anything. They don't know positivism from anything. You think that because they believe, they have a naive view of science, that scientists disabuse their minds of everything. They become neutral observers, and then they report the facts. Now, and they then, if they're objective and neutral and dispassionate and detached or balanced, those are the words that are used, then they can let the truth speak itself through them as neutral observers. Now that is a kind of warhorse positivism, or the other term for it is historical objectivism. And the best literature by historians says that's bunk. There's nothing to observe unless you have a theory that tells you what would count as evidence. You have a theory. All observation, all of it is theory determined. Well, anyway, Walker cites David Bone, Neil Kramer, Gary Novak, me, and Jerry Bradford. The criticism went beyond the debate about methods and philosophy and implicitly sought to reestablish a faith story. Notice this, reestablish a faith story that in its most extreme form represented an ahistoricism. I've been arguing that part of the story is angels visiting a kid and showing him where some plates were and so on. And that he then tells a story about an ancient Lehigh colony. And by getting inside that story and the story of how we got it, we then live in the biblical, the scriptural narrative. It becomes part of the way we see the world. So that the heavens weren't just open then, they're open now. So we live as part of that. That becomes our manual. That's the way we see the world. And then we see the hand of God. We see the miraculous, or however we want to put it. We see the gifts being shed upon us. And we don't just talk about once upon a time and we don't see the Bible as simply an archive, and we don't worship it because we could live without it. And I like what Ross said about that. And our sectarian enemies, the thing that bothers them the most is that we have an open canon, we have the heavens open, and they want to slam the door shut on all of that. And they don't want that here now, except if they're Pentecostals and they're doing their thing. They'll put up with some of that. Stunned by these views, some new historians defended themselves and counterattacked, citing Tom Alexander, Larry Foster, and Malcolm Ford. But he could have cited Martin Hill and Jan Ships. My first encounter with this is Ships telling me, I went to a conference and Michael Quinn arranged this. He gave the paper that I was to read the title, Critique of Mormon Historians, and I want to talk about the relationship of faith and history, and talk about two Latter-day Saints who were trying to explain the Book of Mormon away. That's all I wanted to talk about. He wanted you to be criticizing everyone, so they could circle away. See, and then everyone would be angry with me, and we get this kind of thing 20 years later, which annoys me a little bit. But Jan Ship said, there are two kinds of history. There's sacred history, and there's actual history. And the sacred history, and you heard this before? This is the thing that Ruthven got from the prominent Mormon historian that didn't want his name used. Well, the traditionalist criticisms were weakened by a zest for controversy. Now, I'm trying to be feisty about these things and forthright and not waltz around the issues and therefore, they're so nasty. Weakened by a zest for controversy that at times seemed as personal as it was professional. Moreover, none of the non-traditionalists attempted to write history, and as a result, their criticisms remained abstract and theoretical. On the few occasions that critics cited books they admired, historians were left wondering if a playful sense of irony was at work. Now, they'd say, well, what would you want history to look like? Richard Bushman, for crying out loud. Richard Anderson, Milt Bachman. I could give you a whole list of things. Or I could say, Hugh Nibley, and Jan Ship said, your hero isn't Leonard Arrington, it's Hugh Nibley. Well, is that a sin? But he isn't a Mormon historian. He's a polemicist. He's in the old 19th century polemical mode. We don't defend the faith. See the point? See the point? So the defense of the faith has come by people on the margins, not the history club. Though the Latter-day Saints, and they're faithful, believing types, that they will tolerate criticisms, and they don't find any of that funny. They don't find any of that troubling. Partly because they're good friends with these people, and if you're close friends, you don't get upset at them. I wasn't apparently a close friend. Okay. Let me give you some examples. Well, Walker is confident that on one item, critics of the so-called New History certainly err. Few New Mormon historians advocated scientific or objective history, a 19th and early 20th century idea long abandoned by the profession. Is there such a thing as objective history? Have you ever heard anybody advocate objective, detached, neutral, dispassionate, balanced history? Those are the code words for it. Well, Leonard Arrington, Jan Ships, Marvin Hill. But when we said there's something funny about that isn't very sophisticated stuff, then they said, we don't hold that point of view. None of us hold that point of view. Michael Quinn. He's all for it. Functional objectivity. following the evidence wherever it leads, without a controlling theory,